It is now officially 2 p.m. I always like to say it's officially 2 p.m. in the Eastern Caribbean. So good afternoon and welcome to the first installment of Friday webinars at the Business School UWI Cave Hill. My name is Marjorie Wharton, and I am the Strategic Business Services Director and Clinical Faculty with the Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business at UWI Cave Hill. And I am going to be your host for this event today. Now, as many of you know, the Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business is one of the leading providers of executive education in the region. For the last 29 years, we have been engaged in preparing private sector and public sector leaders to function more effectively in their roles as managers and organizational leaders. At the business school, we see our mandate as linking the academic conceptual side of learning to the practical and implementation-focused reality that organizations confront. As such, we use a combination of academics and professionals as subject matter experts in our academic programs, our workshops, our conferences, and our seminars. And that is also our intention with these webinars that we are starting today. Our topic today is coping with anxiety, personal and professional perspectives. Our webinar is scheduled to run for just over an hour. We have two panelists who will be sharing their perspectives and insight with us, and we are asking you to share your questions as well. If you look at your panel, you will see that you have the option to send us your questions, and you can do that at any point during the webinar. You can also feel free to use the chat feature and share your thoughts or feedback with our panelists. As we go along, the panelists will select and respond to as many of the questions as we can. Let me start now by telling you a little bit about our two panelists. First, we have Ms. Reina Hinds. She is a marketing and sales professional with over 16 years experience with 3 global brands across 2 industries. She's worked with American Airlines, where she created and delivered sales training to teams across South and Central America and the Caribbean. She served as the Regional Business Development Manager for Virgin Atlantic, where she increased sales across the region. And in her current role, she is the Regional Manager for Mercedes-Benz, where she is tasked with increasing presence and sales performance across the Caribbean. She received her Executive Masters in Marketing and Sales from 2 of Europe's leading business schools, ESADE and SDA Bocconi, in 2011. Welcome to you, Reina Hinds.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Our second panelist is Dr. Amour Jules. Mia is a registered clinical psychologist and lecturer in psychology in the School of Education at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. She has an interest in the development and validation of psychoeducational assessment instruments for Caribbean populations and the wider diaspora. In addition, she researches psychoeducational factors which contribute to and hinder the successful transition of child, adolescent, and adult learners through Caribbean educational systems. Mia also publishes and conducts research about various psychosocial factors that influence health damaging behaviors among adolescents and emerging adult populations. Welcome to you, Dr. Amour Jules.
Thank you very much, Marjorie.
Okay. Now, a little background on our topic this afternoon. The COVID-19 pandemic has represented a time of great uncertainty for the world. Most people have been feeling uncomfortable with that reality. Many business owners and leaders are finding themselves in situations that are compromising the sustainability of their business or endangering their livelihoods. There are many emotional issues to be taken into consideration as we navigate this time. Over the next hour, our panelists are going to share their perspectives on what is driving many of the issues that we are facing, and they will offer us insight into what we can do to respond to the situation as it is now and as we prepare for the future. So I'm going to start this process off by inviting you, Reina, as someone who is trained in sales and marketing. A large part of what you often pay attention to is human behavior and what influences clients in their decision making. Taking that perspective, what are some of the emotional responses that you have been seeing or hearing about from those around you?
Well, good afternoon, Marjorie, and good afternoon to everyone that is joining us on Facebook Live and all the other platforms. Very happy to be here. So let me start by saying that with a purely observational perspective that is not deeply rooted in, the sciences, I'm seeing two diverging themes here. One, on the one hand, what I'm seeing is uncertainty. There's a lot of disappointment, frustration, fear, and a sense of powerlessness as well, because people, especially people like me, thrive in a reality and a situation that is very carefully curated and planned. And we no longer have that level of security. And Mia, I'm sure you can tell me if you're also seeing that as you navigate, this storm as a clinical psychologist. But that's what I'm seeing on one end. But then on the other end of the spectrum, which is really, really fascinating, what I'm seeing is something that's very profound. And that is that people are looking for a deeper meaning in all of this. I'm noticing a shift, and this is happening in my various circles, friends, family, etc. And people are going within. They're looking at ways to connect with God, the spirit, the divine, whatever your religious or spiritual background is. You're looking for a deeper meaning in everything. And looking to connect in ways that perhaps you never did before. There's also what I'm noticing, a greater admiration for Earth, because there's so much scarcity in supply. We can see it as we try to go to the supermarket, and we'd like to go to farmers market, and we can't. So there's a much greater and deeper appreciation for the earth that provides us with our nourishment and our sustenance. And then we're also seeing from the animal kingdom, we're also seeing places where tourists were gathering in masses, and they're kind of empty now, and animals are just kind of roaming free. So there's also that great respect for the animal kingdom and for nature at large. But in addition, what I am also seeing is there is a wonderful respect, sense of reaching out to your fellow man and woman. And just very close to home on Wednesday night in Barbados, we at 8 o'clock, for those of you who are not resident here in Barbados, we had the national applause at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, and everybody was invited to stop what they were doing, open your windows, go on your balcony, your patio, go, stand in front of your home and just give a round of applause to all of the frontline workers, the people that are putting their lives at risk to provide services, the essential services that we as Barbadians need. And we all stood in solidarity, and we clapped, and it was a very beautiful moment. So as I start to pay attention to what I'm seeing two very, very different themes. Oh, Marjorie, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's going to be interesting as we navigate that moving forward, because certainly a lot of those changes may or may not become our new way of looking at the world. And it's going to be interesting to see how much of it as a people we want to keep, and how much we allow to revert back to some of those negative things that we perhaps did not like before. Now, Mia, as a clinical psychologist, you may have a slightly different perspective than many of us when we see the kinds of behaviors that are going on. We see a few instances of a particular behavior, and we might tend to use that to define a situation, or we might tend to use it to make predictions about what we think is going to happen in the future. But you are a researcher, and so you examine psychosocial behaviors, and perhaps you will use data to make your predictions and to identify trends and so on. So tell us a little bit about what that means and what research you've been doing to investigate the behavior of people during this current pandemic that we're facing.
All right, thank you very much, Marjorie. Before I get into the research bit, I just want to dovetail nicely with what Reina said. That a lot of the behaviors that you're seeing now, especially the psychosocial behaviors, some positive, some negative, stem from individuals. She mentioned a deeper meaning, greater admiration, wanting to connect. And I just want to put a plug here that Psychology 101 states that our basic needs, the physiological needs for belonging and safety, are those things that drive our behavior. So you can see connections between individuals wanting a sense of belonging, even in times of now, with this COVID pandemic. I'm still finding ways to connect, still finding ways to be a part of a wider community. But I know that I would have conducted some research very recently on some trends in a very small sample of Barbadian workers. And what that research was really looking at was focusing more on the protective behaviors, why workers are more likely to engage in the frequent hand washing, the use of sanitizers, keeping physical distance. And some of the factors that we found were associated with those behaviors in particular had to do with your gender. Women experience greater levels of anxiety and engaged in these protective behaviors more so than males. We found that younger workers were less likely to engage in protective behaviors in comparison to the older workforce. And social media was found as one of those variables that contributes to people's overall sense of unease and anxiety. So the research was really trying to get into the mind of some of the Barbadian workers, some frontline workers in particular. And I wouldn't disclose anything more than that. I wouldn't want any one particular group of workers to be pigeonholed based on this. But suffice to know is that we had a wide variety of frontline workers that participated, and those were some of the findings that we got. So that's the research that I'm doing right now, because I felt that it's important to have data from our context. There are going to likely be other studies, I'm sure, looking at different aspects of the work environment and within schools, different organizations. But this was something that I felt we had to try to at least see what's happening on ground in our context. So that's really a summary of the one piece of research that I'm doing right now on this topic.
And thank you for telling us that. So I'll ask you this, are there any plans to do additional research, or is it ongoing, or has the study ended? Are there plans also to expand it beyond Barbados?
All right. Yes, there are plans to expand it beyond Barbados. However, that's in the works. I don't want to jump the gun. We're still waiting on necessary approvals to get it started. I would also say that the expansion of the study likely would take the form of follow-up interviews, asking people to reflect on their experiences after we look at the quantitative trends in the data. So a follow-up, a qualitative approach, instead of us bringing our narrative, our lens to understand what the Barbadian workers are experiencing. In terms of other research at the moment, because this is shifting so quickly, I think at the moment, that's really all I can say about expanding the same methodology, but also trying to understand the experiences, a qualitative approach afterwards. But that's really it for now. Okay. I wouldn't be able to go any further.
Yeah, appreciate that. Understood. So you mentioned that one of the, as a psychologist, one of the key things that you know is that human beings have a need for belonging. And that's a big part of our makeup. And so we've been seeing a lot of that reaching out, that making connections and so on in virtual ways. If that is something that we're still doing, and we have that as a need, we're finding ways to do it, even though we have to practice physical distancing. Why do you think there's still so much anxiety that's existing for all of us?
The thing is that when you're talking about anxiety, it's your unease about something in the future. Fear speaks to more of a threat that you can definitely identify. They're overlapping strands, this whole idea of fear and anxiety. But with anxiety, it has to do with the unknown. You're not necessarily sure what that threat is going to look like. With fear, oftentimes there is a particular understanding of what it is to be wary of. You asked about why you're seeing, sorry about that, it's a bit of noise in the background, but you're asking why you're seeing that. I mentioned safety needs and physiological needs, and not knowing for some individuals how the idea of safety, it's not just physical safety away from a tangible, not tangible, but something that you can see. You could understand that this is the unknown. You can't see this threat. You hear about it. You see the effects of it, but not truly understanding how is it going to potentially enter my home or enter my system. There's legitimate fear where that is concerned. And as a result of that, you're going to see some spin-off behaviors, as I alluded to, both positive and negative, because of these safety needs that inherently as human beings we have. So some people may seek comfort, both in maladaptive as well as adaptive ways. So comforts, for example, overeating or biting of fingernails. And I certainly am not immune to that. We're all in this, experiencing this as human beings together. Some people pace up and down the house. Some people can't sit still. So working at home under these situations, you might find that your concentration is going to wane very quickly, more so than maybe at work. And then on the other end, you can have a group of behavior to speak to trying to mitigate against the threat. So what do I mean by that? Impatience, for instance, wanting to get home from the supermarket as quickly as possible, or wanting to get back from the office as quickly as possible, being more impatient, hence more likely to, you have to be careful on the road now. You also see in your own relationships, snapping and irritability, because there's this fear of the unknown and you're trying to protect that which is sacred, you know, your temple, your body. Panic buying, for instance, not knowing, in as much as there is this clear information stating that there's enough food in the country based on the media reports. Inherently, there's, apologies for that, but inherently there is this feeling of, I must try to get as many rations as possible down, because intrinsically in us, we have to meet those physiological and safety needs. So it's for some people, it's easier than others to do, but that is the spin off the anxiety and the fear that you're seeing.
Okay. And I thank you for mentioning those, because we know that with a lot of people, people aren't really sure that what they're feeling is perfectly normal. And what I am hearing you say is that these things are quote unquote normal. They're typical. They're things that are likely to happen to us as we are in this situation with so much uncertainty. Yes?
Correct. That is definitely correct.
All right.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead. And we understand that it can happen with the cars passing behind you. We recognize that's Murphy's Law. The least time you would want them to be passing and making noise is the very time that they would. So thank you. I quite understand. That's our new normal. That's part of our new normal. So understanding then that the people, all of us, tend to have this need for security, and we have this need to have some measure of control. Reina, I'm going to come to you and ask you this. We're hearing a lot from organizations, and there's a lot of discussion out there where we are hearing members of the public saying that they're seeing organizations do things, and are they being tone deaf in the way that they're focusing it? Or are they perhaps doing things that are now winning people over to them so that they have a different perspective about their behaviors? So there's a lot of talk that's going on about that, about organizations, and whether or not they are in the right or they are clueless and not connecting with their public. Tell us a little bit about some of those organizations and what they're doing right now or wrong in this current environment in order to really respond to the realities of human behavior, how people are likely to be feeling, and really what people are looking for at this time.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, Marjorie, because what we're seeing now is people have a lot of time on their hands. So we're in an age where a lot of people are either working from home, they've been furloughed, or they're temporarily not working, but people have a lot of time on their hands and they don't have the normal activities that they had 2-3 months ago. So with that, people are paying a little bit more attention to brands and their marketing messages. So marketers and brands are having a tough time trying to relate and to engage with their audience, and do so while creating content that is appropriate. Now, there's so many examples of organizations and brands that are doing really wonderful things. So just to highlight a couple of them, what I'm seeing in terms of trending now is shifts away from me being the brand or the entity, to you being my customer, my consumer, my audience. And it's more towards the community at large. So an example would be Pebbles cereal. I think they produce cereal for children, basically. I don't think it's hugely popular in Barbados, but they've done a phenomenal job by creating these video series that appear on their social media platforms. And these video series they basically throw it out to the public, to artists and dancers and chefs and magicians and any type of creative people that we have out there. And they ask them to upload their videos. And their videos are all about finding activities for kids to do during the downtime. And any video that is actually selected and posted, they get paid for. So what they're doing is they're finding a way to, one, engage with their younger audience, but also two, to give back to the community, because in times like this, there are a lot of people that are not working and they're not earning the same level that they would have been earning before, especially if you're self-employed, or if you're like a graphic artist or somebody like that. So we're seeing that they're not speaking about themselves, me, Pebbles cereal, and how much kids love my cereal. They're actually turning the conversation away from them and turning the conversation to the community, to the families, because that's where their customers are. Their customers are at home, they can't go to school. So they're trying to find things to help them to cope during that time. We're also seeing some shifts in the strategies of companies from a short-term perspective. So if you take the example of an Airbnb, we all know Airbnb as a home share, home stay type organization. However, right now the borders are closed. Airlines are grounded, cruise lines are not going anywhere. So there's a very real need for entities like Airbnb to come up with another solution, something else that they can focus on and monetize in this short term. So what we're seeing is they're ventured into a new segment, which is their online experience segment. And it's very interesting because you can stay in your home in Barbados or Trinidad or wherever, and you can log on, you can pay for an online or a virtual experience. And it's very interesting because you can do things like cooking with a family in Morocco, or meditation with a Japanese Buddhist monk, lessons from a South African man on apartheid and the history of South Africa. So there are lots of different things that Airbnb is doing to make sure that they stay relevant. So temporarily, they've changed their focus. They've shifted their short-term goals, which I think is excellent. We're also seeing, which I think is very interesting, unusual partnerships with entities. So you're seeing DSW, the footwear company. They've linked and they've created a partnership with Hy-Vee, which is a chain of supermarkets in the Midwest in the USA. Because the reality is most retail mortar and brick and mortar stores are closed. And then there's also difficulty in terms of getting things shipped to you because there is a backlog of essential goods and services that need to make their way to the powers that be. So online shopping is not quite as effective and efficient as it was, a couple of months ago. So they're actually trialing a shop in shop concept, which is exactly what the name suggests. It's a shop within a shop. And they're also launching on the supermarket's digital platform, so on their websites. So it's very interesting how companies are trying to fight for survival during this time. One of the things as well that I'm noticing is that brands are looking very, very carefully at their messages, because as you know, any type of campaign, advertising, marketing, those are things that are planned months in advance. So you may start planning your Q1, Q2 campaign from way last year. However, in this COVID climate that we're in now, it doesn't matter how long ago you planned to run a campaign in April and May and June, some things are just no longer appropriate. So for instance, Kentucky Fried Chicken, they're known for one of their taglines, finger licking good. Now is not the time to be encouraging anybody to be licking their fingers. So those are the types of words that they have to kind of stay away from. So there are a lot of examples like that. There's one that I particularly like. It is a man, I'm not sure what state he's in. He's in the US, he's in his 90s, And every day he goes and he buys these Hershey's chocolate bars and he shares them around to people in his community. And, you know, he stands up and he talks to them and their hugs and kisses and everything that's going around. And he is a really popular character in his community. And Hershey's picked that up. They realized what he was doing, and they started to feature him in some of their ad campaigns. It's a great, heartwarming story. It's a wonderful community message. However, with social distancing, with people not supposed to be at home and they're not supposed to be out in public, now is not the time to be running that type of ad, even though it is a very powerful message about, you know, sharing and love in your community. So there are a lot of things that companies have to do to shift away from, even though a lot of heart, a lot of sweat, blood, sweat, and tears have probably gone into, you know, creating some of these messages. Now is not the time. And companies and brands, they need to stop, and they need to look at where they are with their messages and determine, is this okay? Is this appropriate, or is this not? And then also, you see the good, but you also see the bad. So you see some companies as well that are trying to execute, but not necessarily doing a very good job with the execution. So what we have been seeing in marketing a lot is companies adapting and changing their logos during this crisis. And they're changing their logos in such a way that it creates distance between certain elements of the logos. So that's okay, that's, you know, an interesting thing to do, but it has to be backed up with something else. So you have some organizations, some brands that have changed their logos and they've posted their new logo with some hashtags about social distancing. But unless you are coming out with a message for your community, unless you're coming out with some tools and some resources, unless you're showing ways that you're giving back, it's seen as very superficial. And it's seen as almost disingenuous because it looks as though you're just trying to jump on the bandwagon and create some noise in the social space. So companies have to be very, very careful. And as you kind of look around, you'll start to notice the companies and the brands that are being opportunistic and the ones that are genuinely trying to help and to give back to the community in a time where we need brands and entities to help and to give back to communities.
All right, and thank you very much for that. And so as I was putting together preparing for this event, I thought that it would be a good juxtaposition to have this topic covered in these two different ways, because a lot of us are focused, of course, on our emotional responses and the responses of the individual to what's going on. But much of the anxiety that is coming now and is likely to come in the future is also for people who are trying to figure out how and what they should be doing with their business in order to ensure that the business is sustainable, in order to ensure that it keeps working. And so one of the things that we're going to do later on in the session, Reina, we're going to ask you to offer some advice and some guidance as well. What perhaps organizations in the region can be considering, whether it is that they're taking it from a marketing perspective or it is that they're connecting with their employees. But that is something that we want to hear as well in terms of giving guidance on what could be good perspectives for all of us in the region to consider. So Mia, just coming back to you a little bit. We know that human beings tend to have emotional responses that are instantaneous. So it's not that people are sitting there and deliberately thinking to themselves, well, I am going to be anxious, I am going to be fearful, I am going to worry, I am going to be angry. It is a lot of things that happen as a result of our development as a species, as human beings. A lot of us are uncomfortable when we have these negative feelings. Tell us a little bit about how we can maybe shift our mindsets or change our perspectives about these fears and anxiety, and consider that they can also lead us to have some positive development as well.
Okay, all right, thank you, Marjorie. I think before I speak to what fears and anxieties potentially could do for us on the positive end, I think we have to understand first and foremost that they have a place in our life.
Okay.
They're normal again, and in essence, they aren't inherently good or inherently bad. They're signals to us to what's happening internally, psychologically, and they're also indicators about the external environment as well. So what I would say is that if you think of something that you're fearful of, and I know that not everyone is going to respond in the same way. I'm not trying to paint everyone with the same brush, but to highlight the potential good that a fair response can bring, or the potential good that feelings of anxiety could bring is this. You can have a heightened awareness. That's the first thing. One would say you're on edge. As you are on edge, with heightened awareness comes heightened focus. I don't want to bring up like examination type anxiety, but for some people, being in an environment whereby you are on edge, you're able to zone in and block out everything because you are zoning in on that particular source of your anxiety or the source of your fear. So concentration can also increase. Another thing is that the more fearful an individual is, it gives you some insight. Now, remind you, it's very hard to be very cerebral in the experience of an emotion. So I would tell you that some people are better at it than others. It takes practice. But if you were to have a very strong, fearful response, or you snapped at a family relative the day before, or you're not getting on with colleagues in this online space, all right, that's fine. Take a step back. But what did that experience teach you? So can you reflect on the emotion and the triggers that you had in order to be better the next time around? So the reason why I'm setting up this scenario is that it can give you insight into the distance between where you want to be and where you are now. Because if you are not anxious about something, again, you're likely to feel a sense of comfort that where you're at have reached equilibrium, pretty good homeostasis spot right now. But if you're feeling that angst, it means then that there's an opportunity to be better. How you go about doing that, I guess we'll get onto that, I guess, a little bit later on. But it can allow you to look at that distance between where you want to be and where you're at, and be the impetus to break that routine. That cycle of you're arguing about the same thing, or the same smell in the house is triggering you whenever your mom cooks a particular meal. Well, it might mean then that next time you shop, you might consider getting some Capri or Febreze or what have you to change the ambiance of the environment instead of remaining in that space that creates such strong emotions. So it's an indicator of what's happening on the inside. And I think it is important that we as human beings become very cerebral after the event to try to be better and to think and reflect on how can I use this experience, this emotion, to give me some motivation to address a problem better, different way, or to get closer to a particular goal that you have. All right, so it can work for individuals in a positive sense.
Okay, you've outlined there the idea of creating improvement, using the feeling that you have as a way to push you to make change, positive change, to move in a better direction. How does an individual get to the point that they're taking that cerebral approach to the emotion and not just being caught up in the moment and the feeling of the emotion?
Right. So using the topic that we're dealing with, fear and anxiety, they're strong emotions. They're emotions that most members of the animal kingdom experience because the circuitry for it is the oldest part of our brain. So what I'm trying to say is that for some people in the moment, it would be difficult. How do you go about it? How do you go about using experiences in the past to become a better person? Will take work and more work on the front end, because then you're going to be building new habits and building new ways of understanding your triggers on the inside. So for instance, if I were to have experienced an argument with a colleague, and after the argument, I'm like, yeah, I really shouldn't have done that. How would I go about being better the next time? you have to reflect on what were the triggers. What in that experience triggered you? Because you first have to identify what it is that you want to change. What is going to be the direction during the goal of your improvement, your self-improvement. The next thing is that we are more likely to come up with solutions and be able to address these issues if we are in a place of quiet contemplation and reflection. And in these times, it may be difficult for some, it may be easier for others, but even if you're not in a place where you can't get away from all of the anxiety and the angst at home, you can put in earbuds and listen to quiet music and reflect, because the only way in which the situation can get better is if you start with what it is that you can control, what's happening internally. So it sounds for some people like, very, very hocus pocus, Duda, psycho babble. For some people, not for all. But what I'm trying to say is that you need to be able to understand what your body is telling you when you had that flare up of anxiety or that flare up of aggression or anger, and understand the triggers and put down on paper, regular pen and paper, put down what are those things that you are going to do to change that environment, to change that interaction in small ways to see if the outcome is going to be different. And I would say that once you get into the hang of seeing that change could happen, you're more likely to be motivated to try to change other things in your environment that may trigger anxiety or may trigger fear. So I hope that I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. And sometimes simple is best.
And that's good. That was a very good response. It actually leads me to think about, there's a concept that we talk a lot about in management and in leadership and so on, where we talk about the fact that when you are planning, you want to identify the things that you can control and you want to identify the things that you cannot, because there are some things that you may be concerned about, but you certainly have no control over them, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. And so what we may find is that oftentimes when people are feeling so overwhelmed or so out of control, they are focusing more on those things that they cannot control rather than identifying what they can do something about, focusing on that and working to get that sense of empowerment that would come from that. What would be your perspective on that?
I think that's an excellent point, because as it stands now, the only thing that you have true control over, or rather the most control over, because some may argue that we ultimately do not have control over our existence and our life, depending on which lens you're taking. But it has to start with you. And I would also say that there are two ways in which to approach it. Emotion focused and problem focused, or it can work in tandem. Let me explain that quickly. So emotion focused, how to bring the angst and the anxiety and the fears back down. Something as simple as taking the Vaseline intensive care after a bath and rubbing the bottom of your feet in those pressure points and being in that moment of self-care. Taking the opportunity to watch one of those cute cat videos on YouTube to get away from and immerse yourself into something that you like. So I'm saying that in order to have some control over your environment, you have to make the focus of attention you. If you are going to be zoning in on external, you are going to become very overwhelmed, because there are many factors that come into an external, even going to the supermarket, there's so many things that could happen along the way. But if you adopt a certain level of preparedness, okay, I'm going out with a particular mindset, I'm going to have my music in case someone says something that ticks me off, or I take you're trying to make yourself as what's the word? The word is I was going to say secure as possible, but to be as comfortable as possible within what your resources can allow. And it's hard, it's easier said than done. I think the best thing that people can do is start to put down a priorities list and a to-do list, and jot down those things that should be of priority, and how would I be able to realistically achieve it. And if you're unable to achieve it, well, you might have to dip into resources externally, social resources, a friend, a community, an agency, but it has to start with you as the individual. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. That's certainly very good insight into what we can do. It starts to really bring it home for us as individuals to think about even the little thing, as you say, just simply making sure that you are massaging your own pressure points, that you are, oh, I can't believe that you're recommending cat videos on YouTube. Come on. What about dog videos? Poor dogs. They just don't get the same amount of love. But I understand what you're saying, something that's going to make you smile and release those positive chemicals in your brain that's going to help us feel more positive about the situations that we're facing. So Reina, I'm going to come back to you to ask you this. What do you think, in light of the emotions that we are seeing around how individuals are feeling, how perhaps they're feeling about organizations and so on, what do you think managers or other organizational leaders could be doing that could support or could help their employees to feel more comfortable within their work environment?
You know, I think largely a customer is a customer, whether it is an external customer or an internal customer. I think the heart has to be in the right place. And there are a lot of things that business leaders, that employers can do. You know, a couple months ago, we were not in this position. Everybody was driving to work or taking a bus to work, and everything was normal. And then all of a sudden, some people are no longer working. Some people are working from home. And as you navigate whatever your new normal is, companies do have the resources. They do have the, I don't want to say responsibility, but it certainly would be lovely if companies would take the approach and take the perspective that I need to take care of my internal customer just as much as I need my internal customer to take care of my external customer. So, you know, there are a lot of things that companies can do. They can create employee assistance programs, like talk therapy sessions with trained counselors for people that are having a really tough time. Most of us know of somebody who has been touched by COVID. Some of us know people and have lost people to COVID. So it is a very, very stressful time, and companies can do things. Individual talk therapy sessions, group talk therapy sessions. They can also, on the lighter side of things, they can also find fun things to do. I've been seeing companies having virtual happy hours on Fridays. After working hours, and everyone gets their cocktail, their glass of wine, whatever, and they join, and you know, it's a fun night. There are also, you know, virtual birthday celebrations. I've joined a virtual birthday celebration for one of my very good friends, and it was absolutely lovely. And virtual games. So we're going to have to employers and brands and companies, they're going to have to start thinking about things from a different perspective. So everything is going to be virtual, no two ways about it. For the near future, we're not really going to be able to be out and about and socializing in the way that we did. So paying closer attention to the mental health, the mental and the emotional health of their employees is absolutely something that they can and should be doing to help us all weather this storm, because we don't know how long it's going to last. So we have to kind of figure out a way to settle in and get comfortable here, because we might be here for a while.
Okay. That is true. That is a reality. There certainly is a lot of uncertainty about that. We don't know for sure where we are going to be. The discussion, of course, on when we need to open up and need to resume positive possible activities is going on all over the world, and with different responses. So you are primarily, or you have been over the years, primarily been involved in 3 industries, and 3 highly service focused and very connected to customer type of industries. What, as you look across perhaps those industries and maybe some of the others out there, how are you seeing, or what are some of the kind of business strategies that you think all businesses need to start adopting in order to prepare for what's going to be important after the pandemic and into the future?
So what's interesting is that nobody knows what our new normal, nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring.
Yeah.
So as companies are starting to think about what they need to focus on, the reality is they need to stay close to their customer, right? So the customer is the customer is at the core, must be at the core of what they do. So, you know, for instance, if I just take the automotive industry, for instance, right at this point, we have been seeing the focus in automotive going towards hybrid and electric vehicles. And there's also obviously a huge design element. And anybody that pays attention to the features of cars, you know that cars have never been more beautiful than they are right now. So there's a lot of focus and emphasis on design. However, the question is, in 4 months, 5 months, whenever it is that we kind of get back out there, is design going to be as important for the car buyer, or is it going to be something like safety features, and not safety features in terms of, you know, anti-lock and stuff like that, but safety features in terms of superior filtration systems for AC units to ensure that anything that you breathe in has been cleansed and cleaned, and it's healthy and it's safe to breathe the air that you're breathing in. Surfaces, the interior surfaces of the cars, is there something that can be done to make them antibacterial? Do we need to have things like air quality monitors built into cars? So things that perhaps as a consumer, as a car buyer or as a car driver, you never really gave too much thought about. You know, you got into the car, you turn on the AC, the air is cool or it's not, and you kind of just go along your way. But now we have to start thinking about what safety mechanisms we can take when we go out. We wear masks, we wear gloves, we're constantly washing our hands. So we're taking those steps personally. But I think what companies may have to do is they may have to look at their product today and what they need to do for their product tomorrow, because there's a reality that as we move forward, we will never get back to where we were a year ago. You know, there's perhaps always going to be that, now that our eyes are almost opened, there's perhaps always going to be that level of increased cleanliness and increased attention to being safe and to being clean. So it's going to be interesting. And that was just one example, but it's going to be interesting going forward to see how companies and how brands react to what is going to be the new normal tomorrow. But certainly they're going to need to understand the mental state and the emotional state and what is important to customers today, because what's important today was not necessarily that important a couple of months ago. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I'm going to continue, and I encourage all of you to kind of continue to watch the spaces and to really see how companies are handling it, because I can guarantee you that in a year's time, in 2 years' time, there are going to be some fascinating business cases at different universities coming out of this, and how people have dealt with COVID.
Yeah, that is true. And you are already seeing, certainly out there in various places, you're seeing they're talking about developments. Just last night, I saw a report talking about the research in the use of copper as an antibacterial property to include in clothing and so on. So it's definitely a new way of looking at things and thinking about things that we perhaps have not even considered in the past. So I would ask you this: what would you say to any business owner or organizational leader that they should do in order to consider how their brand can stay close to the customer, how they can find out what's going on, how they can keep on point with that language? What would you say they need to do in order to get that kind of information and be able to put those strategies in place?
Right. So It's good old-fashioned market intelligence, good old-fashioned research and understanding your customer. We have long passed the days in marketing where it's about what I can produce and what I can produce the fastest and what I can produce at the most cost-effective price and then sell it to my customers because I'm producing it, so they're gonna buy it. You know, marketing has been flipped on its head over recent decades, and now we're seeing products and services are being created with the customer in mind. So that being said, marketers, organizations, brands, they need to go to the customers. Wherever your customers are, you need to go. So you need to be watching your digital spaces. And not just your digital spaces, but you need to be watching your competitors' digital spaces. You need to understand what people are saying about your brands, what people are saying about your top competitors' brands, what people are saying about other brands. You have to understand and really feel the climate of where we are today. So it's really about listening and understanding who your audience is. And your audience is going to change. The demographics are going to change. Some of your most lucrative clients may grow up and may grow away from your product depending on what type of product you have. So you really need to kind of keep very close watch on who your customers are. Make sure you understand your segments. Make sure that there is clear segmentation within your market. Targeting so that you segment your market, so you know this is my group A, this is my group B, this is my group C. Group A needs this, group B needs this, group C needs this. You target your products to them. You, if possible, you help them, you allow them to help you to co-create products, to co-create services and solutions. And you position your products with your competitors in mind and with your customers in mind. So I know that was a bit of a mouthful, but in essence, you just have to go where your customers are and listen, because they will tell you. Not necessarily telling you directly, but they will tell you because they will talk.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a mouthful at all. I think that that's a very good response that you shared with us. And it certainly has given an indication of specific steps that need to be taken and an awareness to recognize that even though we are in this time where there is perhaps not that interaction, face-to-face interaction with customers, that there still is that need to maintain that connection and to make sure that it's there. And certainly as we have more interactions online, you are really putting yourself into an environment that for many of your customers, it may be that they're now exposed to different options. So it becomes an even greater impetus for organizations to consider what they need to do. So thank you for saying that. Now, I know we've been having a very good discussion, and I haven't said it since I started, but please remember, audience, that you can submit your questions to us. If there are any things that you would like our panelists to respond to, please go ahead. I've seen a few questions have already come in and they've been passed over to us, and we've been able to address them, but you still can take the opportunity between now and when we wrap up at 3:15 to submit your questions. So I would ask you, Mia, because one of the biggest questions that actually has been coming forward from our audience is really to get an understanding of what they can do, because we are in a time of uncertainty and there is a lot that people don't know. There are a lot of people who, in order to get information, are paying attention to all of the social media sources, or you are completely glued to television and every news item that comes up where they mention the coronavirus. And I will tell you the truth that I myself have been doing it to some extent, especially with the news, but I've had to decide that I look at it only at a specific time. But you know, I surf the channels to check to see what everybody is saying about the virus. So given that anxiety comes from us not knowing, and the fact that we are influenced or perhaps driven almost insane by the amount of information on social media and on the news, what are some of the strategies you would suggest that our audience should consider as they move forward to cope with the now in the period of uncertainty, and really to set themselves up for after we know for a fact that we are back to quote unquote normal?
Okay, thank you for that. I think that I could easily list like 10 different strategies that people can employ, but before I say anything, I just want to let everyone know that ultimately, whatever strategy you decide to do has to be within your scope to do. I wouldn't want individuals to think that whatever it is I say, because they are unable to get access to whatever material is necessary to do it, that somehow they're going to be fall on the wayside. It has to do with what are your strengths and playing on those strengths. So I'm going to start with something that Reina had mentioned about the need for community and the examples of the online communities. I find it very interesting that in now whereby we have so much at our fingertips and being able to order in different things or have access to all these resources, that the one thing that we are craving in this situation is our fellow man, human contact. And I know that there's this push for physical distancing, but the first thing I would say is that social connections, very important. And social connections, again, not just with individuals, but I did mention cats. I'm a huge cat fan. Interacting with another live, living creature that can give you that reciprocal feedback, to give you love as you give love. I think that what makes us human, the need for kindness, the need to demonstrate that we care, help us and give us hope to move forward. I would also mention that something that you mentioned, I'm glad you did, this whole idea of happy hormones and releasing those. The things that we've known all along, back to basics, the exercise, focusing on projects that give us a sense of accomplishment. So you see many of these videos, these at-home projects with kids making macaroni shells or coming up with ways to untie bits of material and thread them back together again, coloring sand or these are things that are very communal, but also give us a sense to take our mind off of things first and foremost, but to reconnect with those things that are arguably most important, the things that make us human, those interconnections. I would definitely say that you have to watch how much media you consume, because remember, it's very sensational. It is to get viewership. It is to make you feel like the next news cycle is going to be better than the next. So there's that hype built into it. I think being able to move away from that would be very important. And as a result, it makes the source of the news even more important. Because based on what we found, for instance, social media, using social media as a news outlet from the research increases people's anxiety and feelings of loneliness. And you would think social media might be something that keeps people connected, but the current onslaught of information, we can only process so much. So the radio, I mean, I've become a huge fan of Voice of Barbados. I now understand why my grandmother loved it so much. But the reason why I'm saying this is that you want short bursts of information that summarizes it, and then you move on to the other aspects of what makes you a human being, right? That social component. And the last thing is ask for assistance if you're overwhelmed. I think what this has brought out, this situation is that it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to feel lonely. It's okay to talk about how you're frustrated and upset. I mean, it's almost like an emotional little renaissance whereby people are willing to share as much as possible their experience, and we're able to empathize more with other people going through something similar, more so than very insular way of operating. So by craving that social interaction during physical distance restrictions, I think is highlighting for many people the importance of quality connections with others. I think that is very important. Other things, self-care, massages or going outside and watch. It depends on your personal taste. I don't want to get into that, but it has to be based on the resources you have available. It has to be based on the individuals that you have that care about you, that you can tap into that quality interaction. And it's not as complex as that, because this is showing you that the things that we need in order to get through each day are those simple things. It's not as complicated as you think, so that's it from me, really.
All right, and thank you very much for that. So 3 points there, that sense of community, that's important. Control the amount of information and the source of the information. And certainly when we have the opportunity, ask for help and recognize that that connection and that willingness to share is an important part of it. I also heard you mentioning there that you don't want, or this is what I'm taking from it, that you don't want people to feel almost anxious now about the fact that there are specific things that they have to do in order to calm themselves, but really to work with what resources are available to you and to do it the way that you can and do what works for you. But the important point is really to recognize that there has to be a strategy. You have to make a decision that you're going to do something.
That's correct. Just to add there, like what I really meant, you're correct in what you said, your summary. But say, for instance, there's a lot of talk about meditation. And when you think about meditation, you know, you have to have the yoga mat and the incense in the background and the music playing. It may be your version of meditation, not the prescriptive, have all of those check boxes, because you may not be able to have it. Exercise, not everyone is able to go and get a spin bike in this time, but you can use physical based exercise whereby your own body weight serves as that. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I'm getting at, that yes. You, the resources you have.
Yeah? Absolutely. And definitely there are many sources online that can support any of those types of activities, whether it's meditation, finding ways to get humor into your life, finding ways to create gratitude, finding ways to exercise or do the kinds of physical activities that are required. So thank you for that. We also have someone from the audience who is thanking you for the idea on virtual birthday celebrations and virtual games. They've identified that as a great idea that they will consider as well. So Reina, what are some strategies that you would leave the participants with as we are moving closer and closer to our end time? What are perhaps some of those top things that you would say any organization needs to be considering practicing or to start practicing as soon as they can in order to deal with what's going on now and to position themselves in a good place for when things open up again?
Yeah, so I think really I'm just going to touch on some of the things that I spoke about before, and they really come down to 5 key areas. The first one is changing your focus. As a brand, you need to change your focus away from me to you, to we, to the community. That's the number one step. And if you're not doing that, then you need to start. The second step is think outside of the box. These are unconventional times. These are unprecedented times. So you really need to find partners that perhaps 6 months ago, it would be unheard of for your brand or your entity to partner with someone else. But it's about survival right now. So have a think about what type of partnerships you can engage in right now that are going to be mutually beneficial. You also need to be very agile and kind of change your focus if needed, change your short-term focus, and all of those long-term goals that you had planned at the start of your financial year, they may need to take a back seat. You really need to be very, very, I guess agile is just the best word, and look at what you can do right now to influence your customers, to influence your employees, and to stay alive, to stay in business. And what we're seeing a lot of as well is generosity. We're seeing brands giving of their products, giving of their profits. And brands are not necessarily just companies or entities. Brands are also people. We have Rihanna, who, God bless her, she has agreed to purchase ventilators for us. She has pledged money in the fight against COVID. Oprah Winfrey, Ralph Lauren, so many celebrities. And then what happens is once one starts, it's a beautiful trickle-down effect. And people that have will share their wealth and share their profits. And companies are also sharing their products. One last example. I know this is supposed to be a wrap-up, but one last example. Marriott Hotels is a brand that I absolutely respect and love. They are, once they have hotels that are in close proximity to hospitals, they're allowing first responders, frontline staff, essential workers to come and stay there to get rest between shifts, and people that it's not necessarily convenient for them to go home because they're putting their families at risk. Perhaps they live with older people or people with pre-existing conditions. So they're allowing them to stay at the hotel basically free of cost. So even if you can't give your profits, give of your products, give of your services, because now is a time that communities, we have to rally together. And then lastly, take a real honest look at your ad campaigns, take a real honest look at your marketing message, and get rid of anything that is no longer serving the community. If it's just opportunistic, if it's just you posting prices and you posting this is how much these shoes cost now, and we need to get deeper than that. So those are my 5 things. Change your focus, create unconventional partnerships, be agile and change your short-term focus, get rid of those ad campaigns that are not working, and be generous.
All right, and thank you very much for that. And thank you for that summary, therefore, saving me from having to do it. But that's fine. Thank you very much for that. I think that's some very good information, clear and precise strategies. And I would say the same thing based on what you've said. You seem to be suggesting as well that these are ideas, or it's guidance. And it's not necessarily that an organization has to see that it has to do these things in the way that somebody else is doing it, but really consider your reality, consider your resources, and then use these kinds of strategies in the way that will work for your own organization. Yes? Yes. All right. I see you mouthing correct. All right. So thank you very much for that. And I am going to come to both of you just to have a closing statement at the end. But really, I think that we've had a very good discussion about the fact that anxiety for us, it is a reality, it is where we are, and it's perfectly normal. We are aware that there is going to be anxiety for businesses and for organizations, and there's also going to be personal feelings of anxiety and about our own individual situations. And both of you have shared with us ideas, strategies, insight that would help us to realize that what we're feeling is normal. We can take steps in order to have some sense of control about where we are and preparing for the future. So thank you for that. I want you now, just in your closing statement, to just give your perspective on what perhaps we should, or the kind of mindset that perhaps we should be adopting over the next 6-7 months, the rest of the year. Any closing thoughts from each one of you? Reina, I'm going to come to you first, and then I'm going to allow Mia to do the second part. So go ahead, Reina.
So I think my closing statement have to be around community. So oftentimes we think of companies as profit generating centers, but at this time, we are all in this boat together. So companies, brands, marketers, entities, we need to kind of shed some of those preconceived notions. We need to focus on our communities. So it's not just about putting our customers at the heart of what we do, but putting our community at the heart of what we do. Because if we don't stand in this situation together, we will all fall. We will all fall.
Yep, absolutely. We are in this together. Thank you very much, Reina. Mia?
Well, what I would say is that I think it highlights the importance of those soft skills in functioning in a wider society. We tend to focus on the tangibles, and we tend to focus on the things external to us, but in times like now, in order for the society to work, abide certain laws, be able to think about your fellow man, as Reina said, community mindedness and generosity, you need things like kindness, empathy, those skills that you can see the importance of it now. Furthermore, I would just want to put a plug here because I'm a member of that association. The Barbados Society of Psychology has an awesome Facebook page, and it has a wide array of strategies that individuals can look to. Also, the university's COVID-19 task force, I was looking at some of the resources that they have, and the psychosocial group in particular would have been uploading, it's my understanding, like resource materials to help people and groups of people be able to cope during this time. So I would want individuals to have a look at that, the Barbados Society of Psychology's page, and they're working, I believe, They're working on having something up whereby people can actually call and talk and discuss. But again, within your resources, you know, it's a voluntary based organization, but we do recognize the need to facilitate that sense of community. You know, so that's it. That's really what.
And we just had 2 questions that have been sent in. We have one. Are there any tips you can give to encourage people to do online sessions with a therapist? We know of people with anxiety who are struggling to cope, but they're not receptive to meeting with a therapist. Are there any comments, advice, or tips that you can give to encourage them?
To encourage individuals, I think it has to come from a place of people's. The hardest part is getting over people's resistance. There's you can't force anyone to do anything, and meeting with a therapist, there's nothing wrong with that. But you also have to think about resources. I mean, therapists during this time, yes, there are opportunities for pro bono work, but again, just like all essential workers, it's like we're also trying to deal with what, like I just showed you my nails, and I'm a psychologist. You know, we are human too. But to encourage individuals, I think more to talk about their problems with people that they trust. It need not necessarily be a therapist. And I am not trying to dissuade people at all from using those resources, but remember, it is about the resources that you have. And I think now, if you have a brother, if you have an aunt, if you have a cousin, if you have a pastor, if you have a priest, if you have a confidant, oftentimes when you have individuals reaching out to individuals that they don't know, it might be because whatever they're going through is so confidential, an issue that they may be embarrassed or have hang-ups about it, or it might be severe whereby someone within their environment would not be able to assist. But what we're going through now, I would not say is like chronic anxiety. It's likely going to be acute, because again, once we get accustomed to the curfew changes or get accustomed to things will change every week, and we get into that zone, you are going to see people drawing on those strengths and not necessarily have to necessarily go outside of their community for assistance. But again, as it pertains to tele counseling and online counseling, you would have to touch base with the individual members of the association, because it depends on how they are going to facilitate their sessions with their clients during this time.
Okay. And we have another question that would also be for you, Mia. A natural tendency under normal circumstances when someone is expressing anxiety is for us to say it will be okay, don't worry. In this environment where there is so much uncertainty, is that something to say? And if it is not, what would be a better response?
I understand. The worst thing you can do is to tell someone who is angry to calm down. The worst thing you can do is to tell someone who is crying, you know, that happened to me too. You have to be someone that is willing to listen and allow the fuse to slowly out itself. And the parallel use of a fuse, I know some people might take issue with that. But what I'm trying to say is that individuals have to have the opportunity to what's the word? You can be in the presence of someone and that be more therapeutic than talking nonstop in a room because you don't feel you're heard. I think it's about, I understand, I'm here for you, I'm willing to talk when you're ready. So it's trying to create a safe space. Again, sorry with the cat references, but if you are now trying to socialize a kitten who is anxious that I'm going through right now, you have to meet that sentient being halfway. You don't force yourself upon, and you don't neglect completely, but you be there, a listening ear to those people that you care about in your environment, right? So no, don't worry. I think the best thing is, I understand. I'm here for you. I'm willing to talk. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you very much. That appears to be the questions that we have right now. Thank you very much, audience, for submitting those questions to us. And we are therefore about to wrap up. That brings us to the, yes, ma'am?
Yes, I have a question for Reina. Sorry.
Yes, that's quite all right.
So she mentioned, I was taking notes, huh? She mentioned Airbnb is having some meditation
online experiences.
monk. No, honestly, I'm like, it'll be so great if you can pass on that information to me because I am very interested in that. Sorry about the
Yeah,
background.
We
yeah,
understand.
sure.
Outside of the normal things, like yes, it's all right to exercise, but to exercise with, I don't know, some special fit pro, like exercising with the rock. Of course, I'll tune into that. You know,
It
so
is.
all of those to invent things that are yes the basics, but that community sense. I did not know about that. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that point
No,
as well.
you're welcome. And I hope that everybody takes this opportunity to kind of look, and it might not be Airbnb virtual experiences or online experiences. It might be, you know, something else, but take the opportunity to search because there's a lot to do out there. There's a lot things that, you know, you might step outside of your comfort zone. I think there's CrossFit training or training with some previous Olympians, and you can pay to do personal
Yes.
with Olympians, etc. So there's so many interesting things that you can do. Just take the time to find it. There are lots of resources out there. And like I said before, I settle in because we're going to be here for a while. So the best thing to do, and I think in a conversation with Mia previously, she might have mentioned this, if you can't change your circumstances, you change your mindset about your circumstances. So that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to our panelists, Dr. Mia Amour Jules and Ms. Reina Hinds, for taking the time this afternoon to share with us their insight on what we can do to cope with anxiety, both from a personal basis and a professional basis. On behalf of the Sagipur Cave Hill School of Business and Management, I want to thank all of you who joined us for this first in our series of Friday webinars at the Business School UWI. Please look out for information about our upcoming webinars. The next one is scheduled for next week, Friday. That one is going to be taking place in the morning. It starts at 10 a.m. I know many of you have already registered for it, but if you are not able to join us, please know that you can visit our website, uwichsb.org, and you will be able to see the recording of the event there. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay safe and do the best that you can to stay at home and identify strategies for coping with your own anxieties, worries, and concerns. So take care and stay safe.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Take care.